This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Hone, and it's Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Over the years that I've been doing this series, I've looked at more than 50 different creature types, but there's still plenty out there that I haven't looked at, including squirrels, which we're going to look at today. Squirrels are one of the most popular creature types in the game, despite the fact that there's only 38 cards in the game with the squirrel type or that make squirrel creature tokens. They've gotten significant support over the last year or so, especially from Modern Horizons 2, and that got me to thinking about squirrels that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Squirrels show up in unsets pretty often too, and we have one of those coming out in the near future. Squirrels are so common in unsets that they're even using an acorn foil stamp from now on to indicate cards that would normally have silver borders. So yeah, it seemed like a great time to take a look at squirrels. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 includes major events like set championships and pro tours, and a second tier top 8 includes events like Magic Fests and Grand Prix. Alright, let's get started with our list. At number 10, it is Scurry. This tree folk comes with Evolve, and anytime a counter is put on it, it cranks out a squirrel creature token. That's a pretty nice payoff for just playing a creature with more power and toughness than the oak, and it's also nice that no matter how the counter gets put there, you get a squirrel. It gained its 1 point in a modern creature toolbox deck where it appeared as a singleton copy. This type of deck runs both Court of Calling and Eldritch Evolution, which allow you to tutor up whatever creature you want in many situations. And the oak is a nice thing to search up in situations where you want to go wide, and a pretty nice thing to sacrifice to Evolution, and a good creature to pair with Convoke because it makes those squirrel tokens. Its 1 point came in 2021, so it seems pretty likely it's going to gain more points in the future. At number 9, it is Deep Forest Hermit. It has an identical score to Scurry Oak, but has a higher finish, so I gave it the higher slot on the list. This 5-mana 1/1 elf brings 4 1/1 squirrel tokens along for the ride, and because it's also a squirrel lord, you actually get 4 2/2s. That means you get 9/9 worth of stats spread across 5 bodies for only 5 mana, which is an amazing deal. Vanishing, of course, gives the card some downside as it gives it an expiration date, but the good news is that all the squirrels hang around even if the hermit goes away. It's been featured as a sideboard card in Amulet Titan decks in Modern. At number 8, it is Chatterfang Squirrel General. Chatterfang is a sweet ability that lets you make a 1/1 squirrel anytime you create a token of any kind, as well as the ability to give up squirrels to kill creatures. It doesn't hurt that all these nice abilities are attached to a 3-mana 3/3 with Forest Walk 2. Importantly, it doesn't matter what kind of token you're creating. It doesn't have to be a creature token even, it can include food tokens, and that's something that decks in Modern and Historic are interested in creating. Getting a creature token that actually adds to the board when you make your food tokens is pretty nice. Chatterfang is a reasonable shot at gaining more points in the future. At number 7, it is Acorn Harvest. 4 mana for 2 1/1 squirrel tokens isn't a great deal, but Acorn Harvest is sort of an old school Lingering Souls because it ultimately gives you 4 1/1 bodies since it has a much more efficient flashback cost out of the graveyard. It gained its only points in a Quiet Speculation deck in Odyssey Block Constructed. As you can imagine, that was a deck filled with various payoffs for getting flashback cards in the graveyard, and it could easily get cards into the graveyard too. Getting value out of the harvest, even if you discarded it, was a pretty nice deal. It hasn't gained any points since 2002, and it's unlikely to gain more in the future. At number 6, it is Nested Shambler. This 1-mana 1/1 zombie puts a 1/1 squirrel token into play for each of its power when it dies. At worst, that means you'll get a 1/1 squirrel, but if you have ways to pump its power, it can get really absurd. It's gained all of its points in black pauper aggro decks, which tend to run stuff like Bone Splitter to increase its power, and Carrion Feeder to take advantage of the multiple bodies the Shambler makes. It's likely to continue to gain points in pauper. At number 6, it's Deranged Hermit. It's quite similar to Deep Forest Hermit, which we saw earlier, and that's because the much newer Deep Forest Hermit was designed as an intentional callback to this card. Like the other Hermit, this gives you 9/9 worth of power and toughness across 5 bodies, all for only 5 mana. At least, that's what it does at first. Unlike Deep Forest Hermit, Deranged Hermit has Echo, so if you want it to stick around, you have to pay 5 mana again on your next turn. The nice thing, though, is that you get to keep all those squirrels no matter what. It gained all of its points in mono green aggro decks in standard and extended, but it hasn't gained any points since 2003. At number 4, it's Ravenous Squirrel. This squirrel is a very nice sacrifice payoff, as it gets a +1/+1 counter anytime you sacrifice an artifact or creature, and it also has the ability to sacrifice one of those things to gain 1 life and draw a card, so it can power itself. The squirrel has gained all of its points in modern Jund food decks. Food is a great fit alongside the squirrel, as food is all about being sacrificed, either with its own ability or with something like Gilded Goose. Food is doing well in multiple formats right now, and it seems pretty likely that Ravenous Squirrel will continue to find success in at least some of those decks. At number 3, it's Chatterstorm. Storm is one of the game's most powerful mechanics, so having a squirrel token making card with Storm is pretty sweet. The decks that run this plan on really going off with cheap cantrips and mana producing spells, and then making enough squirrel tokens when they cast this just to win the game. Chatterstorm's points have all come in Pauper. These decks could get their storm counts up to a pretty high number, and then they would cast First Day of Class and then Chatterstorm, so that the deck could usually just win the game the first turn you go off, instead of having to wait an entire turn. It also meant you didn't need to get your storm count to a completely insane number, since all those squirrels were hitting twice as hard anyway. Ultimately, this combo was way too powerful for the Pauper format, and Chatterstorm was banned out of it. Given that that's the only format it's been played in so far, it seems highly unlikely that it will gain more points in the future, though entirely counting out any card with Storm is probably not a great idea. At number 2, it's Squirrel Nest. This aura goes on a land and makes it so that the land can tap to make a squirrel creature token. While that on its own isn't incredibly powerful, the nest can be used pretty effectively in some specific decks. In Odyssey Block, it combined quite well with Standstill, because if you had already squirrel nested a land, you could keep adding to the board while forcing your opponent to make the tough choice of casting something and letting you draw 3 cards. In Standard, it was really effective when combined with Opposition, a deck that liked to go wide with creatures to lock down the opponent's stuff until the deck got to a point where it could win the game in a single swing, and obviously the nest was pretty powerful in a deck that has Opposition in it. Squirrel Nest gained all of its points way back in 2002. It had potential to gain points in Legacy because it could be combined with Earthcraft for an infinite combo, but Earthcraft got banned in the format in 2003 before Squirrel Nest decks could put up any top 8s at major events. And at number 1, I have Toeski, Bearer of Secrets, a squirrel who's still in Standard right now. This legendary squirrel is based on Ratatoskr, the squirrel that runs up and down the world tree in Norse mythology, and it's fittingly powerful. It's indestructible, and it makes it so that each of your creatures draws you a card if it hits your opponent. This can result in having a massive impact right away, as you can draw those cards the same turn you play Toeski. In Standard, it has mostly been played in aggro decks as a top curve creature that can come down and quickly reload your hand, giving you a chance to stay in the game, even against more controlling decks. It's seeing play in other formats too, having already received points from Pioneer aggro decks and Legacy food chain decks. It doesn't have any other points in other formats yet, but it's being played elsewhere, and has a good chance at continuing to add to its score, further cementing its spot as the best squirrel in all of Magic. Well, those are the 10 squirrel cards that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of these squirrels, you can find direct Card Kingdom links for each of them in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, you can subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past MTG Top 10s, and there are around 430 of them, including several more on specific creature types, you'll be seeing some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.